is so strange. I need to look to see how many people signed up.
Hi, Liz.
Hello, how are we?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. What time is it where you are right now?
It's 6 o'clock in the evening, almost.
Nice.
So which of you went on the lash with Catherine? That was you. Was it fun?
We had so much fun. So we have talked, I guess we've interviewed her the last 3 years for her books, and we just got buds. And one year I told her I want to go to Dublin. I'm dying to go to Ireland. And so she said, if you come, we're getting French 75s at the Westbury. So I held her to it. I think she was in the middle of crazy festival season, but she said, I'm going to make it work. And we talked for 4 hours straight.
Oh my gosh. I did not know for 4 hours.
I wish she'd told me, because I would have joined you guys.
Next time. Well, we may be coming back next year.
Okay, cool.
But
look forward to that.
I think she said she was wanting to have everyone go, but it was like there were so many festivals going on. She didn't even want to bring it up because
No, the Crime Writing Festival was on that weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we just had a ball, but she had just got her oh no, never mind. I was gonna say she just got her driver's license, but we didn't drive. So
that's right.
Yeah. Oh, she just got her driver's license. That's really interesting.
Yeah. In Ireland, you don't learn to drive in school.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do it yourself with your own dollar. And I didn't learn to drive until I was 30.
And I've heard that they're trying to get it where you only have mass transit and Ubers and taxis now in Dublin City. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, it's not quite like that, but they're encouraging people to leave their cars at home and trying to improve public transport links and get people onto their bicycles. But, we're very attached to our cars, and we don't really have the climate to be standing at bus stops.
Yeah. I would say we're in the same boat. It's so hot. I could never imagine us.
Heat isn't the issue here.
Yes, that is true.
It's rain and freezing and wet and windy and cold,
We had the best weather though. I just can't wait to go back. We were there in the Republic for a week, and then went up to Northern Ireland for a week and went to No Alibis.
No Alibis, and you met David. Yeah.
Yes, I loved him. He was we were so busy. We got there at 5:25 and they were closing at 5:30, which I would like to say Ireland needs to keep their shops open longer. That's my only complaint. But
in Dublin, everything stays open till 6. Belfast is a bit of an anomaly. But in Dublin, everything
stays up until 9. Our shops stay open late. But he had an event, and he actually stayed and talked to me for about 30 minutes, and he was so nice. That was probably my favorite bookstore there, although I love the one in Galway.
Kenny's or Charlie Burns.
Charlie Burns. They were so good to me. And Hodges and Figgis. And Buckus. Yeah.
Which one is the one that gave you the employee discount?
The one in Galway, Charlie Burns gave me employee discount. I bought several books there. So
I love that.
Loved it. I of course I know you hear this all the time, but I'm of Irish descent. I know there's apparently 40 million of us in the world.
Yes, I was like, me too.
Yeah. But really? I do think Irish people, it seems like it's kind of a joke about the Americans coming over trying to find their people.
Yes.
But there is a lot of that.
Yeah, but
you're more than welcome.
Yes, we were in Sneem. My great grandfather came from Sneem, so that was in the Ring of Kerry. That was just a lot of fun.
That's so beautiful down there. Wow. Beautiful.
I can't believe he ever left, but I guess starvation will do that to a person.
Oh yeah.
We had a lot more wind there in the Western than we did in Dublin. We didn't get as much wind in Dublin.
Well, it's very exposed on that west coast. It could be very windy in Dublin, but you won't notice it because you're surrounded by buildings,
Interesting.
Sneem is right out there on the Atlantic coast.
Wild Atlantic way.
Yeah, I mean, if you went straight across from Sneem, you would hit Labrador, I think, in Canada.
Yeah.
Would be your
Oh,
first
interesting.
handful. Yeah.
That puts it in perspective as far
Yeah.
as
That's
the
how far
chill, I'm
north
sure.
we are, you know.
That is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Liz, welcome. I'm so excited we got to make this work out, being that you are across the pond. We normally do our book clubs at 7 p.m., which usually means we have a fun drink with us. But since it is the work day, I just have water.
Water
This
it
time.
is.
I would have laughed though if
tea.
Elizabeth still had a drink. That would be
Yeah.
fun.
No. Just a good old bottle of water. So, yeah. Yes.
Anyways,
So, yeah.
we record our book clubs too. So normally, since our book club is at 7 p.m. One Tuesday out of the month, people are used to meeting that time. So we were still hoping we would get a good crowd, but I know people will be watching this in all different hours as soon as they get the recording. But Elizabeth and I have lots.
Register.
Okay, I didn't get a chance to look before, but that's a great number, and I'm so excited to talk to you because I am freshly finished with this book, so it is on my mind, and what a ride! I'm so excited. By the way, I'm Allison Frenzel. I'm one of the co-owners. We just launched right into things once we saw you, but and then Elizabeth is our book buyer, and we normally just kind of go back and forth with our questions, and if there's anybody in the chat that has a question for Liz that wants to post, we'll try to get to your question, answer it at the end, or in the middle of it. And at the end, we will instead of announcing our next book, we will talk about our book review, which is where we talk about the best books coming out this fall, so you can trust us. You don't have to, waste your money on books that aren't that great. We're going to tell you the really, really good ones.
Okay.
Yeah. Strange Sally Diamond was on our summer book review. That was
yes.
Like we usually do this where I'm kind of the headhunter. I find these books really early. So I read Strange Sally Diamond, I guess probably in June, maybe even in May. So I'm glad Allison reads them closer too, so she remembers finer details.
It usually involves like me going, oh no, we have the interview, and then I read it over the weekend. But it's kind of fun to read a book like that. It's like when you're young, and that's all
because I think the faster you read a book, the more you retain it,
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
that's probably true.
Well, and I was a little nervous because I read a lot darker than Allison does, and so we're like, Strange Diamond, yay! And I was a little nervous about Allison reading it, and she loved it. So high praise.
Wow, that's great.
I did. I'm not like a sensitive Susie on all things, but sometimes Elizabeth will say like a book is not dark, and I'll read it and I'll be like, Elizabeth, like they were tearing off body parts. Like where is it dark for you?
Well, the thing about Sally Diamond is there's no graphic descriptions at all. So it's only as dark as the reader's imagination.
And maybe that is my issue.
Yeah,
maybe it's more of a therapy situation.
There's a lot of stuff that's implied, but it's never actually stated what has happened.
Yes.
Not graphically anyway. So yeah, there's implications of what went on in the room. But I never describe it. So, I've seen some kind of Amazon reviews which was going, oh my God, it was so horrifically violent. I'm kind of going, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, you're like, that's on you.
If it was, that's you. That's your mind.
Right.
That's good. I love it.
That is really funny. That is a very good point.
Well, I will. Yeah. Now I want to introduce you, Liz.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. We're off a little bit. We're used to nighttime. Okay, so Liz Nugent has worked in Irish film, theater, and television for most of her adult life. She is an award-winning writer of radio and television drama and has written critically acclaimed short stories, both for children and adults, as well as the best-selling novels Unraveling Oliver, Lying in Wait, and Little Cruelties. She lives in Dublin and has won 4 Irish Book Awards, as well as the James Joyce Medal for Literature. So Liz, I have been a fan forever. I'm a huge Irish crime aficionado, so I have loved your books so long, and this is a kind of a fangirl moment for me, I must say, to get to talk to you. So we're so thankful you're here. And can you, I know this is a spoiler full discussion. Everyone here has read the book. There's no need to keep it spoiler free. So can you just kind of remind everyone a little bit of the plot of Sally Diamond, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so Sally Diamond is a very reclusive character. And she, before the term, she is rescued from a really bad situation when she is 5 years old and then adopted when she is 7 years old. But she remembers nothing prior to her 7th birthday. And when her adoptive father dies, she disposes of his remains in a very unorthodox manner, shall we say. And because of that, she comes to the attention of her neighbors, and then of the police, and then of the world, because suddenly people discover who she really is. And who she really is the child of a child that was kidnapped maybe 50 years previously. So her mother was kidnapped as a child by a pedophile. And oh my God, it sounds really graphic, but yes, she is the product of that. You wouldn't call it a relationship, but she is the product of the pedophile and the child that he kidnapped. And her adoptive father is a psychiatrist who treated her mother. And he and his wife, who trained as a GP, were allowed to adopt Sally after the death of her birth mother.
So good.
So good.
You have mentioned before that you enjoy writing your characters from a male perspective, which is really fascinating. I would love for you to unpack Sally and kind of who she is and the perspective you wrote her, and kind of if any part of you is represented in her. I would love to hear more.
But funny enough, writing Sally was easy. Like, her attitudes are kind of my attitudes. Like, if I took off all my filters and said exactly what I wanted to say, that would be, I would probably be quite like Sally. But because I have to conform to the social norms, you don't say these things. Like, the vicar says to her, I wonder if you would consider returning to church. And she says, no, it's really boring. And she's just totally brutally honest. But, I feel that way too. And she also has an aversion to giant shopping malls. That's also me. She says kind of funny, quirky things. She says, I don't wear bras. I don't know why women insist on them because they're so uncomfortable. Is that not true?
Start a trend, Sally.
Yes. But we all think that, and yet we all wear them because social convention dictates that we should. So she comes out, it's kind of blunt things. She tells, because she had such a terrible time at school, she doesn't really know what other people's experience of school might have been like, or she doesn't relate to what other people might have thought of their school days. So when she comes into contact with some children in the beginning of the book, she advises them to leave school and not to go because it's a terrible place. And she has to be kind of pulled back by a family friend and said, you can't say those things to kids.
Right.
So yeah, she puts her foot in it all the time. But also there is another narrative running that comes in probably about 25% of the way into the novel, which is her brother Peter, who she doesn't know about. She has no memory of meeting Peter or no knowledge of him. She doesn't know that he exists. And he is living on the other side of the world in New Zealand. And he has had a very different type of upbringing with his birth father. And he was taken away from his birth mother, whereas Sally was left with her birth mother in a really horrible situation, locked up in a room. Whereas Peter, her brother, was brought into the main house and allowed to grow up normally, although he was also told that he had a terrible disease that meant that he couldn't have physical contact with anybody except a blood relative. So he was kept isolated as well. So there's really huge themes of isolation within the book. And I think that's because it was written during COVID. Ireland had one of the longest lockdowns in the world. So, you know, for a long, long time, we couldn't travel for more than 2 kilometers, which is probably 1.5 miles, I think, outside our homes. So we couldn't see our friends, we couldn't see our families. So that sense of isolation kind of crept into the book and into the lives of the characters as I was writing them. So yeah, Peter has a very different take on his childhood and a very different experience, despite the fact that he has the same father and the same mother.
Okay.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the tone of the book. And I think what makes you such a masterful storyteller is you think it's going to be this dark book. It's like, you know, you start explaining and you think, oh, it's really dark, but it's also really funny. It's also deeply emotional, and it's hopeful. So how do you balance all of those to kind of make this story not too dark? But yeah, I mean, you're you know, horrified on one page and then laughing on the other. I mean, is that something that you do on purpose, or did that just kind of happen with Sally?
Yeah, I think I do. I put in the humor on purpose, because I think if I've gone to a very dark place in the book, I know that I need some light relief after that, and so I assume that the reader does too. So I will go to something funny, but I'm very careful with Sally that she is not a figure of fun. We are laughing with her. We're not laughing at her.
Right.
She is neurodiverse in some level, but because of her traumatic background, not because she was born that way. You know, if she was born into normal circumstances, and if her first 5 years had been different, she would have been a different child altogether, or a different adult altogether. So sorry, I'm losing the thread of the question. What were you saying about
How do you balance the different emotions there with the dark?
Oh yeah, I think I get into Sally's head. You know, I spent as like I really, you know, I trained as an actor years ago, and I think that really helped in inhabiting a character. So I get into the mindset of Sally, and I say the things that Sally would say, and I think the way that Sally would think. And because she is that bit different, she is not as shocked and traumatized by the revelations of her background as everybody around her is. Everybody else is horrified to find out that this is her background. But to her, because she doesn't remember it, she has no memory of it. It's almost like it happened to a different person. So she's much better able to deal with it because of her neurodiversity than the other people. And her brother Peter, like when he deals with it in a completely different way. When he discovers his father's horrible betrayals of him, that it cost him his mother and his sister and his only friend in the world, who he had for a very short time, when he discovers those betrayals of his father, his reaction is very, very different and very dark and very disturbing.
That's true.
But again, I have to get into his head and think, you know, okay, so if I was brought up in that environment and Conor Geary was my father and this was my experience and this was my only example, if this man was my only example of how to be a man or how to be how to react to women, how to behave with women, you know, what would the natural result of that be? And I took that to, I think, what is probably its logical conclusion, if that were the case.
That's great.
That's good. There is really an interesting issue of like moral judgments with characters' choices, and one particular that stands out is her adoptive father not telling her who she really was. In your opinion, was that the right thing to do? I'd love to hear more about that. as far as his character.
I think because when he adopted her, when he first came across her, she was almost silent and extremely traumatized. And so he, as a senior psychiatrist in charge of her and her mother's case, he drugged her. I mean, he drugged her and sedated her. And when her birth mother dies in fairly horrific circumstances, he brings her to his home. He adopts her. He is formally allowed to adopt her. And he and his wife argue over her care. But because Ireland would have been a very patriarchal society at the time, his word held more sway than his wife's. So he would have had the final say in her treatment. And he decided, and I thought about this, I thought, if I was a psychiatrist and I had a child who was deeply, deeply, deeply traumatized, and I had a way of erasing those memories from that child, would I do it? And I kind of thought, yeah, I probably would. I probably would. So I make up the fact that he has sedated her for almost 2 years, to the extent that she doesn't remember anything. So her first memory is her 7th birthday with what she assumes to be her mother and father. And she is later told that she is adopted. She knows that she's adopted. But because Sally is somebody who just accepts the status quo, she just accepts everything. She's not somebody who questions anything. She's not somebody who's curious. She never wonders about her birth parents. She's not curious about them at all. So she's quite accepting of what has happened. But I don't think, I think her father, I think had her mother lived, like her mother died when she was about 17 or 18, her adopted mother. And I think there's kind of a subtext in the book that you will see that, you know, the adoptive parents didn't quite agree on how to handle Sally and how she should be kind of socially integrated. And I think if her mother had lived, she would have told Sally the truth. But because she was left with her father, her adoptive father, who's kind of used her as a specimen, as a case study, like he wasn't cruel to her, but at the same time, he did use her as a case study her entire life. He kept notes on her progress in all kinds of ways, and he evaluated her constantly for her entire life. And, you know, he wrote theses about her and, you know, published papers about her, you know, without identifying her, obviously. But, you know, I don't know if I put all of that in the book, by the way, but, you know,
I remember the files that
okay,
she saw
yes.
of her.
Yeah.
Sure.
So she was, her entire life, her progress was being monitored. And maybe he thought that the truth would be too upsetting for her. Maybe, I think maybe out of kindness, he didn't tell her the truth because the truth was so horrific and so dark. And I kind of think if I was the adoptive parent in a case like that, would I think I might have given her a sanitized version. And in fact, in the letter that he leaves for her, he gives her a sanitized version because he doesn't know that, you know, the world is suddenly going to find out about her background. He thinks that, you know, it will still be, you know, up to Sally whether or not she pursues the truth or not. He gives her very broad strokes outlines of what happened, but doesn't give her the full facts.
It's interesting. I just had my own personal book club this week, and we talked a little bit about that. Just not necessarily something like this, but most of the time parents give their children a more sanitized version of the past out of kindness. So, yeah. Okay, I have to ask you. So anytime I get a new Liz Nugent novel, the first thing I have to do is open it up and read the first sentence because your first lines are the best.
Thank
And
you.
I love the one in Lying in Wait that just kind of made the book for me. And you can, tell everyone that if you want to. But I wonder, do you keep a list of books or first lines that you want to use eventually, or do they come to you, or is that kind of the beginning of a book for you?
It is the beginning of the book. Like the first line, the first thing I think of is the first line. I think with one of the books, I wasn't happy with the first line and I kept changing it and changing it. And when I got to the very end of it, I went back and I changed the opening line. And it's a book actually that hasn't been published in the US. It's called Skin Deep. So you can't get you can get it through English or Irish bookshops, I suppose, or maybe on one of those big warehouse websites. But the opening line of that was, I wondered when rigor mortis would set in, or if it already had. And the opening line that you're talking about of Lying in Wait, the opening line of that is, my husband didn't mean to kill Annie Doyle, but the lying tramp deserved it.
I think she did.
Yeah.
I
And the
love that.
opening line of Little Cruelties was, all three of the Drum brothers were at the funeral, but one of us was in the coffin. So what I do is with every book, I open the story in the aftermath of a big incident. So in Sally Diamond, her father has just died, and he's the only person she has left. He's the only person that she relates to, that she has a relationship, the only person. So her father has just died, and it's how she reacts to that situation. And in every book, it's how does the character react to that situation, and how they react to that situation dictates the tone of the book and the type of character that we're dealing with. So when Sally puts her dad out with the trash, we know that Sally is not your average Joe or Josephine.
That was so great. I love it.
Oh, Brenda asked, did the father expect to be thrown out with the trash?
No, he didn't. I mean, he should have known.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, he should have known when living with Sally all that time that that you can't kid around with her.
Yeah.
But there's lots of things that Sally, that he would have said, or that she would have seen on TV, that didn't make entire sense to her. So he relates to the real world on a real level. So
Right.
he's not going to adapt entirely to Sally. So yeah, he would just throw out terms like that, put me out the bins. It's a thing I've said to my husband.
Right. I think we don't realize those things as much. And my mom she's a teacher and she had a foreign exchange student, and often the foreign exchange student would ask her what all these things mean. And I don't think I've ever realized America has so many baseball, I guess they're idioms. And so he'd be like, what does it mean? Say that came out of left field. What does that mean? Or what does it mean that we're down to the bottom of the ninth or something? People would throw out that he has no reference for. And I don't think that so many people even realize it. So my mind was he didn't realize what he was saying, and that he didn't really remember that she would not pick up on that.
That's true. That's true. I remember babysitting my nephew when he was quite small, and I was watching a talk show, and Sylvester Stallone's wife was being interviewed. I can't remember her name.
You should know this.
I don't know.
Very glamorous model back in the day. This is 20.
I can picture her in my head. I can't get her name.
But she was being interviewed, and she said something about something happened, and about the divorce and whatever, and she said, and then my whole life blew up. And my nephew kind of watched the interview, and he watched it intently for the rest of the interview, and then he turned around to me and he said, what happened when her life blew up? He actually thought like everything had exploded. He thought
Oh
there
my
had been a
gosh.
bomb, and that her house exploded, or that, you know, her family exploded, and he wanted to know how this had happened.
You
We
poor
just don't
thing.
know, you know, we don't know what particularly little children.
Yes.
And Sally is a little child in that way, you know, her sort of developmental, her normal emotional development was stunted, you
Mhm.
know, by what happened to her. So, you know, she does take things literally. She has had very few influences in her life to relate to.
That's true. When I was reading and it would switch over to Peter, I was trying to like him or trying to have some empathy for him. And it really made me think, and I wanted you to weigh in on this, of course, is Peter a victim of this?
I think Peter's life is almost sadder than
Mm.
Sally's, because Sally gets help. Sally has, you know, over the course of the book, which, you know, takes place in Sally's life, we see about 4 years of her life. And she has psychotherapy through all of those 4 years, or 3 years. I think it's 3 years actually. She has psychotherapy for 3 of those years. So she develops, and, you know, she is helped, and she blossoms. She comes out of her shell. She starts relating to people. She starts making friends, and, you know, talking to people voluntarily instead of pretending to be deaf.
Right.
Peter gets none of that help. Um, Peter couldn't be any other way. And I think he is a victim, and it was at the end, obviously, he's a perpetrator, and he's turned into the monster that his father was. Although he thinks he's entirely different because he's not going after children, but he is looking for a woman to lock her up into a barn that he has specially constructed, like his father did. And, you know, he has when Lindy, we should talk about Lindy. Lindy is the girl that his father kidnaps when they get to New Zealand and abuses. But Peter falls in love with Lindy, and when his father dies, he has the opportunity to let her go and doesn't. And you just kind of go, why? I was kind of thinking, if I was Peter and Lindy was in the barn, my father's dead, I have the opportunity to let her go, but she's the only friend I have in the world, and I don't have, he doesn't have anybody else he can relate to. He doesn't have anybody else to talk to. He doesn't have a single other person in his life. And I thought, he wouldn't let her go. He wouldn't. You know, I was trying to channel what I thought a man like Peter, who was brought up in the circumstances that he's brought up in, you know, he's only just discovered that he doesn't have this horrific disease that his father has lied to him about. So yeah, he's very screwed up. He's very, very screwed up by his father. And he's definitely a victim. I mean, I do have sympathy for him, and I don't condone what he does at all, but I can see why he is the way he is. And it's awful. The way he is horrific and dreadful, and taking the baby away. It's just, you know, there's so many, the Peter chapters broke my heart probably more than the Sally chapters. The death of Rangi, his only friend, and taking the baby away from Lindy. Those scenes gave me, you know, a lot of, I came close to tears. Like, I'm not a crier. I don't cry easily, but I felt very emotional writing those scenes. They were tough. They were tough to write. They're probably tough to read as
We
well.
were. But I mean, for me, it was just so visceral what he experienced, which was tough to read. And I mean, we were in his story too, so it felt right for the character, for
Yeah.
sure.
He is a monster, but he doesn't know it. And
Mm-hmm.
he's he's just somebody who, when he goes out into the world eventually and he gets a job in cybersecurity or whatever it is, cyber, I think it is
I think it
cybersecurity,
is too. Yeah, to
in
remember.
finance, in high finance, fintech, we call it here, finance technology. But when he gets that job, he can't relate to his colleagues. He never goes for a drink with his colleagues or, integrates with them because he has never learned how to socialize. He hasn't had the benefit of those years of psychotherapy that Sally has. So he's kind of scared of people. He can't relate to anybody that isn't locked in a barn.
Right.
That's really screwed up. So when he eventually meets Sally, he expects that she's going to be the same as he is. He expects that she's going to be, and he can't tell her the truth about what he's done because he knows it's wrong. He knows he'll go to prison. He knows he won't survive prison. He can't tell her the truth about himself. He can't tell anybody the truth about himself. So even if he was to go to psychotherapy, it wouldn't help because he couldn't ever tell the truth. So, even though Sally tries to encourage him to come with her to psychotherapy, he could never,
Right.
He could never recover. Like there's no hope for a character like Peter. It's devastating how he ends up. I feel it now still, 2 years after I finished writing it.
Well, I had a further question, but this fits into what I asked before because I just remembered when you had written, Peter says it, he says something like, my father is 100% evil, but I am only half that. And I thought that was like a very interesting way of putting things. But when you said like he doesn't know that he's a monster, but that he cannot reveal to Sally what he done, it reminds me of that quote in The Talented Mr. Ripley that says, no one believes they are a bad person. And which made him so complex. I don't know. It's not really a question. I just wanted to comment on it.
That's one of my favorite books, actually. And,
really? Okay.
Yeah. A huge influence on my writing, Patricia Highsmith. And that movie, actually, the film version of The Talented Mr. Ripley, I could watch that till the end of time. It's so beautiful.
It is.
Like visually, it's stunning as well as the story being great. But yeah, he's just so complex, and he is Ripley-esque. Like he knows obviously that locking up women is wrong, but he doesn't know how to relate to people on any other
right.
level.
He doesn't know how to unwind himself from it all.
He can't do it. He tries when he eventually comes back to Ireland and tries. Just he can't fit in because he can't tell the truth. And he says the one of the things that he says is about his own father is he says, he loved me in his way. He loved me. And he says to Sally, he wasn't 100% evil. He's talking about his own father. He said, it wasn't 100% evil. He loved me in his own way. And Sally, of course, is horrified. And Mark, her uncle, as she discovers latterly, is horrified by this comment because they can't understand how Peter could defend Conor Geary when he knows what Conor Geary did to their birth mother.
Right.
It's quite a dilemma.
Well, I kind of I have a broad question and I'm going to try to narrow it down a little bit, but I'm very interested in the Irish versus the United States in several aspects. One of them being, I know that there was an extra chapter in the United States version, and I wanted to ask you about that, and kind of, even trying to Americanize words like, I know they've done it before, like rubbish instead of trash. And also, just were you published in Ireland first and then making a United States debut? I mean, there's so many great Irish authors that we can't get in the United States, and it drives me crazy because I read these fabulous books and I can't bring them into the store. But I know that's about a million questions. But maybe, I guess, start with the fact that our version is a little different than the Irish version.
Yeah, my American editor, I have two different publishers. For Penguin published me in the UK and Ireland and the Commonwealth countries, which include India, Australia, New Zealand, Pakistan, some countries in the Far East. And Simon & Schuster published me in North America, so USA and Canada. And my American editors wanted a more hopeful ending for Sally. So the letter from Angela at the end of the book does not appear in the Irish UK Penguin edition. So at the end of the book, in this part of the world, Sally is utterly devastated and on her own.
Interesting. How does that make you feel as an author, having two different feels?
Actually, when my editor I think it was it was Nita Prose who wrote The Maid. Nita's my editor for North America.
Interesting.
Yeah. And she said, we really need a kind of a hopeful ending to this story. It's too grim. And American readers need some hope. They need some light at the end of the tunnel. So, would you consider, giving some hope to Sally? And I found it really easy. I just kind of thought of it off the top of my head. I said, well, I can write this letter from Angela that, tells you that, they're not going to let her slip back into her old ways, that, that she is going to be welcomed back into the community, but she has to mend some fences. She has to make apologies. Apologies have to be made to her. But we know she's going to be fine. She's going to be okay. And I didn't mind doing it. It took me about half an hour to actually write that. So, I mean, then there was a few edits and a few tweaks here and there because I had called Christine Cynthia, which was her original name from the original. And things like that, characters' names change all the time. And sometimes I forget what the characters' names are because it's at the very end of the book. You get to the end of the book and you realize you have 9 characters whose names begin with L. You know what I mean? Something like that happens. And so you have to change 4 or 5 of them. But in your mind, they've always been the character whose name begins with L. So, yeah. So there was a couple of things like that, tweaks and changes that I had to do. But really, it took me a very short time to fix that for Nita in a way that she was happy with. And she was very happy with it, that ending.
That's really funny.
Even with the Irish authors, I mean, is it hard, do you think, for an Irish author to make their US splash? Or I mean, there are several, like Andrea Mara. I love her work, and I know she's just now coming over to the United States.
Yeah. I think it's Americans, by and large, like to read books that are set in America. They don't tend to read too many books that are set outside America. I think Girl on the Train was one of the few books that really broke through from this side of the Atlantic. But I'm very good friends with Robin Harding. I don't know whether you've come across a Canadian writer who lives in Vancouver, and Shari LaPena, who's also from Toronto, and they are both told by their editors to set their books in America because Canada is too foreign for readers. And I just think, well, if Canada, if like it's just over the border, you know,
Right.
you can see it, like Vancouver is down the road from Seattle. Toronto is not far from Chicago. It will be the nearest big city, would it, to Toronto? I'm not sure. My
Close to
geography,
Buffalo, or
maybe
yeah.
it's a few. But anyway, like those places aren't, I don't think that they're so foreign that Americans couldn't get it.
Right.
But that, you know, their editors tell them to. So I think, you know, books set in Ireland and New Zealand, like mine is, are far less likely to break through. I was on when in 2017, when my first novel was published, Unraveling Oliver, in America. It was chosen as one of the 6 Book Buzz books at the Book Expo in New York. And I came over and there was a big fanfare. And the 6 books chosen were Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn, My Absolute Darling by Gabriel Talent, The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. And then there was Stay With Me by, I'm going to pronounce her name wrong, Ayobami Adebayo, a Nigerian writer set in Nigeria. And then there was a book called The World of Tomorrow by Brendan Matthews, which was a book about Irish immigrants coming to America. And then there was my book, which was set wholly in Ireland and with a little bit set in France. The first 3 books that I mentioned, which were all wholly set in America, all broke through and became New York Times bestsellers straight off the bat, no problem. And the other 3 that weren't set in America did not trouble the New York Times bestseller list.
Wow.
So
We're changing
I'm
that.
ashamed.
I mean, we have our whole mystery thriller sections from all over the globe. Because
That's true.
oh, that's great. That's great.
Yes, but we need to be better for sure. Now I'm a little embarrassed that we're all softies and you had to make a special chapter for the
I didn't mind
Americans.
though. I didn't mind, and in fact now I think I like that American ending better. You know, because
It was
gives
subtle
me,
too. It wasn't completely
yeah,
like, and they lived happy ever after. It was a very
yeah,
subtle.
yeah, and it gives me some solace to think that's okay.
Yeah.
But I've left my readers here thinking, you know, that she's, you know, holed up in her house, not
Right.
pretending to be deaf, you know,
Right.
that she's slipped completely back into her old ways. And yeah, I feel a bit bad about that.
I hope she got a new piano. That's my biggest thing. I hope
Oh
she.
yeah, yeah. I think now she's probably teaching all the local kids how to play piano, and
That's good.
I think the kids love her, and she loves them. The character of Sally was kind of loosely based on Boo Radley in To Kill
Oh,
a
I
Mockingbird,
like that.
because, you know, he was very reclusive, but he loved the kids.
Mhm.
He used to leave little treats for them in the hollow of the tree for them. And, you know, so, and he saved them at the very end of the book. So, yeah, he was a recluse. So, yeah, Boo Radley was the primary inspiration for Sally.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that book.
Yeah.
You had was really interesting when you brought in the inclusion of armchair detectives with the podcasters and the DNA. And it was really interesting to kind of follow how this crime was occurring, because it felt very like 1980s horrific situation. And then when the podcasters are really like leaning in on who he is and who she is, and the DNA. And my question is for you, do you feel like we have any secrets anymore because of these kinds of things?
Well, I know a lot of people who have, got ancestry.com, things for their birthday, as a gift.
Right.
And, it has turned out to be, in some cases, quite a nasty surprise, because they discover that maybe their father isn't their father, or they have a sibling they don't know about, or, so it's very hard to be private these days.
Right.
But Peter, it's the one thing that Peter didn't think of, because he's in the world of cyber and crypto and computers and everything. He didn't think of DNA. It didn't cross his mind. His biggest mistake that he made was he wanted to get the DNA test. It was him who sent the DNA test to Sally, because he wanted to prove that he was related to her and that he was her brother. But he didn't think that actually that DNA test might show up his daughter that he had by Lindy, which is pretty dumb of him. But yeah, I couldn't, like, that would have destroyed the story if he if he hadn't done that.
Right.
So yeah, I can use technology to an extent, but I don't know a whole lot about it, which is why you like the cryptocurrency thing gets about a line or two in the book, because I don't understand how the thing works at all.
Right. I don't either. So.
I asked somebody, but I got enough information to get away with it in the book, that he gets the money from Sally in cryptocurrency. But yeah, I don't think I think it's hard to not have a footprint somewhere. Where I think it's interesting that young kids now, teenagers, are more likely nowadays to have analog phones than smartphones. They're rejecting the whole thing. They're turning away from it. And I think that's a good thing, because, they need to be out socializing and seeing each other and not living their lives in their bedrooms in front of screens. I would actually like to spend less time in front of a screen, but I am sadly badly addicted to social media. Like I could spend hours scrolling, and it is an addiction. I need a 12-step program to actually get off the internet.
Yes, it's true.
My mind kind of goes to, okay, so in the 80s, things like this were happening, and we had no idea that a couple of decades later, we'd have these DNA tests. What's going on now that we're doing that we're not going to know in 20 years, get caught doing? Not me necessarily, I'm an angel, but I'm just saying it's a, just kind of an interesting thought. So,
but what's actually more horrifying is that with AI, somebody can make up a video of you doing something that you didn't do. You know what I mean? So, we are opening with AI, we are opening Pandora's box.
Right.
There might be some benefits to, particularly in medical science, where AI can sift through data in seconds and, come up with percentages and results and evaluate outcomes and perform surgeries. And, that there are going to be incredible advances in medical science, and people are going to live into their hundreds, definitely. But the downside of it is incredibly dangerous, because it has crept in so quickly and under the radar. There is no legislation in place in Ireland. I don't know about America, but there's certainly no legislation in place. I don't think there is in America either.
I don't think so.
To know how we are going to police this stuff. It's very worrying for people in the creative industries like me, or like any writers. Like, you could feed it into an algorithm. I don't even know if that's the right word, but you could feed in information to a AI thing,
right, generator,
and say, write me a book in the style of Liz Nugent, and it would scan through all 5 of my books. It would probably find every short story I've ever written that was published, everything I've ever broadcast on the radio. I could go through every interview that I've ever done. It would, get my speech patterns. It would, and it would be able to come up with some kind of story as written by Liz Nugent, in my style, and it might be better than anything I could write, because it learns AI learns as it goes along. So a book might come out written by a robot without my name on it, but that has stolen all of my life experience, all of my, writing experience, all the skills that I have learned along the way. That's terrifying, and that's the same for a lot of creative artists, and particularly visual artists.
Right.
I mean, their work was already being hijacked and stolen. But we can have new Van Gogh paintings any day. I'm sure they're already out there.
The photography scene, it's really interesting and sad, haunting to see what it's done, because I think there was recently, I cannot remember where it was, but a photographer won an award for an AI photograph. And then later, what'd you say?
I heard about that, or I read about it. Yeah.
And later admitted it. And it was a beautiful photograph, like, of course, precisely done. And I'm like, but that moment didn't exist. The light didn't exist, which is so sad. It's like we're not even computing anything in our brain anymore.
Yeah, but we couldn't tell.
I know
that it was fake.
Right. That's so true.
And much more cynical people, probably.
Yeah.
Well, Liz, what are you working on next? We want to hear what the next Liz Nugent book might look like.
I can't tell you anything, but I can tell you the line. Okay. Now this may change because it hasn't been, I haven't written very much of it. I've been very slow. I've had a very, very slow year. But so the opening line is, for the second time that month, I woke up with the wrong husband.
Can't wait. Can't wait to read it, to sell it. That's going to be great.
So fun.
Are you in?
Oh,
I'm in. I'm in.
We're huge Liz Nugent fans, and we sell your book so well, and just wish you the absolute best. And we're so thankful that you joined us today for us. So
yes, thank you so much, Liz. I so appreciate it. For all of you that are here, and then for those that are watching this recording, I'm going to post in the chat the sign up for our book review, for our fall book review on November 14th at 7 p.m. It's a wild and fun time with me and Elizabeth, and explaining all the books that we loved this season. We will throw in a few spicy takes of the ones we did not love, so you can avoid those purchases. That seems to be everybody's favorite part, is when we start to get a little spicy that way.
Yeah,
for sure. But would love for you. And Liz, you're welcome to join too.
Okay. Let me know when it is.
1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, your time.
I know, yes, but you can watch a recording, so you could sign up, and then the recording will be sent to you.
Great.
So yes, but would love for you to come. Liz, thank you again. This was amazing. I can't wait for your next book. You have got me as a fan, even a softie like this American.
I'm glad that she's out there, so that I could leave Sally in a good place too.
It was important. Definitely.
Thank you so much. I'm going to sign off and say goodbye.
Right. Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.